Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Look for the Helpers. We have some special guests here for you today. And first, we'd like to introduce myself, Megan Brady, and Nicole Navega, your Look for the Helpers hosts. So, Nicole, if you wanted to kind of introduce to some of our listeners who you are and maybe why we chose the name Look for the Helpers, too.
Sure. So I'm Nicole Navega. I am currently full-time at Florida Gulf Coast University in the social work department. I'm a field education coordinator, so I spend most of my days trying to place bachelor level social workers and master level social workers in internships. I also am lucky enough to teach. I taught some master level advanced practice classes this year, which is always exciting. And I am also getting my PhD in social work, and my focus is actually on helpers because I've done a previous study, a research study about the impact of secondary trauma on helpers. And to be honest, it's part of the reason why I wanted to put this together, because I really love this concept that Mr. Rogers so graciously put forward for us, which is his, famous quote about helpers, which says, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" And so we really wanted to look around in the community that we have here in Fort Myers, in Lee County, and hopefully we'll look a little bit beyond that eventually, at the people who are doing the good work in the community right now, the people who are out there helping right now, especially in the times that we're in today. And I'm so happy to have you guys.
I always forget to go first, actually, so I don't have to follow up with all that you're doing. I'm Megan Brady. I actually work for Park Royal Hospital, which is a private inpatient psychiatric facility here in Southwest Florida. My role is kind of like a community liaison. So, my role is kind of looking for the helpers. I go out and I seek out services and organizations in the community that can benefit our patients in their continuum of care, while also, spreading the word about our programs and services, should people in the community need behavioral health treatment. And I've come to know a lot of incredible professionals in the community. And so when Nicole and I came together for this podcast, it was kind of like the perfect pair, that we're able to kind of take the people that we get to talk to on a daily basis and, take their message and share it with the rest of the community so that everybody else can hear the incredible work that you guys are doing too. So with that being said, we usually like to start off getting to know you guys a little bit on a personal level. We have some little icebreaker questions. So my question for you today would be, what was your favorite childhood candy?
For me or Christopher?
Both.
Both. Okay. So
I know it was around the same era, like the same time too.
Did they make candy back in the caves? Let me think. All right. So yeah, my favorite candy growing up would be, and still is to some degree, Milk Duds. Gotta love Milk Duds.
Yum.
Solid choice.
Good one.
Yeah, good. I have, we used to, I don't see them anymore, but there used to be these, they're called Warhead candies, and they were the most sour tasting candy you could ever imagine. And I think it speaks a lot. Yeah, I think it speaks a lot to what I'll talk about later, but I like the effects produced.
Awesome. All right. What about, somebody mentioned Fun Dip last time, and I was like, man, I forgot about that. I love that too. I always like these questions. Brings you back. Nicole?
My favorite childhood candy is probably those little crazy like strawberry wrapped candies that your like grandma or your great aunt used to have in a bowl. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? They look like a strawberry. The wrapper's in a strawberry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ray, you don't know what I'm talking about?
No, I can't. No, I thought you were going to go with Pop Rocks or something.
I thought you were saying Pop Rocks too,
Yeah,
and
me
then
too.
you took a right turn to grandma candy.
Let's be honest. I mean, there's not a candy that I haven't met. I mean, that I haven't met that I didn't love. So we could go on and on. I also love chocolate Necco wafers. That was probably my second favorite chocolate. You guys even know what chocolate Necco wafers are?
Yeah, it's
Struggling
just
here. I'm sorry.
really low on the totem pole.
I'm
for me,
devastated.
so.
It must be a northern thing. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Please don't give that to the north right now, because I can say that Necco wafers are not the candy of the north.
It'd be the last straw.
Chocolate, only chocolate. I don't like the other flavors. They used to make all chocolate packs of Necco wafers. Anyway, what's yours, Megan?
Oh, Fun Dip. I was like a big
Yours.
fan of the Fun Dip.
All right.
So there was a question too that you asked that I like.
So I like to ask this question. I used to ask everybody that ever sat in an interview with me for a job before, and this was my question for them because I always felt like it could tell me a lot about them. So no pressure. If you could be an inanimate object, what would it be and why? So a non-living object, what would it be and why? Chris is already laughing. Whoever wants to go first.
A security camera.
Okay, why?
As I am just extremely curious about the things that I don't know about. I want to see everything, you know?
Mm-hmm. Would you be a security camera like in one specific place, or would you be a security camera that had access to like every single security camera?
Oh,
Like the mainframe of all security cameras.
That's good. I wasn't even going that deep. I was just going to say like my living room.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, would it be like heat vision or like night vision? Is it just your typical security camera?
Yeah, I would say run of the mill. I wasn't ready to go this deep into it, guys.
Well, we're preparing you. We're preparing you to go deep, Chris.
Okay. All right. You're breaking me in. Okay.
Yeah. What about you, Ray? What do you got?
So you've given me a long time to think about it, so thanks for that, Chris. I think I would probably be a guitar.
Ooh.
So, obviously, when I would be in somebody's hands that played me, I would actually enjoy it.
I like that.
See what you did there.
Now, we could go really deep with that one, okay? Really, really deep, but I don't think this is the time and the place. I really don't.
We're gonna need it. We're gonna need an outside session for that.
Exactly, and a couch and somebody scratching their beard. Yeah.
Oh,
So, well, why don't we jump into it and maybe share with our listeners what organization that you're from, Children's Network of Southwest Florida. If you want to give us a little introduction to the organization and the community that you serve.
Sure. So Children's Network of Southwest Florida, we're the foster care system here in a 5-county area. That would be Lee, Collier, Charlotte, Henry, and Glades. So we cover a huge geographical area. And what we do is we take care of the most vulnerable kids in that 5-county area, kids that come into the dependency system or into foster care. So when there's an investigation done by DCF, after they determine through their process of safety risk, after they determine if the child is safe or unsafe, then the child comes over to us and we, quote unquote, drive the family to permanency. So permanency could be hopefully reunification with the parents, or it could be permanent guardianship, or it could be adoption, or it could be another planned placement. But basically, reunification is our first and hopefully the goal that we strive most for.
So you answered a couple of questions too in that one question, because we were going to say, what does that relationship look like with DCF? I know that you guys work closely alongside of
Right, so,
before you go though, Ray,
yeah, yeah.
I just want to make the audience clear that you're the chief operating officer at Children's Network.
Yeah,
I'm sure that
I'm actually the janitor, right? I clean up everybody's mess. That's what I do. No, yeah, I'm the COO for Children's Network. Yes. So, yeah, I know that that you want to know about that permanency. What does permanency actually mean? And really, it means different things to, I think, different people. And I think the layman out there doesn't really understand what it is we do at Children's Network. I think
Right. I think there's a lot of common misconceptions too when hearing DCF or,
right.
People that work with families and kids in foster system. I think that what would you say the most common misconception about the work that you guys do is?
Sure. I think that the most common misconception is I think people think that we're there to take their kids. I think that we're there. If you were to ask somebody you met at the 7-Eleven, what does DCF do? I think you would get most of the answer to be sort of wrapped around that premise, like,
right.
We're there to take their kids. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. What we really want to do is surround the family with additional helpers so we can keep the family intact. That's really what we want to do.
That's great. And I remember so you participated in a panel at an event last year in the community called Our Kids in Crisis event, and it was how addiction affects families. So more specifically, how would you say addiction is affecting our families here in our 5-county area?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, Megan, it is absolutely the biggest driver of kids coming into foster care is addiction, without a doubt. And even I think the second most would probably be domestic violence, which is usually fueled by alcohol. So, you can look under just about every piece of the system and see that there's addiction involved in so many of those places. So that, again, that's our main focus, and what drives most of the kids into foster care would be addiction. So you can see it manifest itself into the number of kids and the behaviors when the kids come in. It has such far-reaching effects and devastating effects on families. It's really torn families apart for as long as I've been working in the system, and a lot longer than that, I assure you.
So, how long have you been working for Children's Network, Ray?
Yeah, this September the 11th will be 20 years with Children's Network. It's actually the only job I've ever had out of social work school. Yeah, this has been it. Yeah.
Can we do a quick introduction of Chris? And then I want to get back to all of it, but I want to get back to this issue of every single job that you've had in Children's Network, because I love the fact that you've been there for 20 years and it's your only job. I want to hear about everything that you've done, but I also want to introduce our audience to Chris.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Okay. Christopher Rossi, I'm the peer recovery support specialist with the Children's Network. And so I've only been there since September, but I've already dealt with been introduced to close to 60 families in that amount of time. So when I came in, there was a huge demand for a peer recovery specialist, and they didn't waste any time, putting me in touch with all of those families in need.
Can you give us a quick snapshot about what that means?
Yeah, so a peer is someone who has the lived experience of either mental health or substance abuse history, and I happen to have both from about the age of 12 on. My life story includes a lot of mental health institutions, doctor's offices, and then the substance abuse side of it. And April 4th of 2017 was the day I got sober. And I've kind of dedicated my life, I guess, to making up for some of the things that I've done, and then helping other people who have lived the same life experiences that I have, and kind of showing them that there is a way out. And you know, one of the biggest common themes with mental health and substance abuse is that feeling of hopelessness. I know I've been there, and just showing people that there is a way out, and it gets so much better from both aspects.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And I think it's pretty incredible that there is this now a professional role carved out in our communities called a peer recovery support specialist, and its application is very unique in your setting, Ray. And you know, tying back to what you had mentioned earlier, with identifying this huge need in the community, what did your programs look like before, or maybe as, you know, when you first started working there? What models were you using, and how were you able to integrate a peer recovery support specialist into those programs?
Yeah, so great question. I think that I saw a need right away, because the difference is, I mean, when I walk into a home, and just really quickly, I started out as what's called a T-BOSS counselor. And that would be T-BOSS stands for Therapeutic Behavioral On-Site Services. So I was actually a therapist that would come into the home and work with foster kids. That's kind of how I got my start in this business. Wow. Actually, as like a cringing underling, I like to say. So when I would come into homes and I would work with these foster kids, and knowing what the driver was, why most of them were introduced to the system, was because their parents were engaged in some sort of substance abuse. So right away, I would walk into the the home, and I could relate right away to, you know, some of the issues the kids had, why they were there, in either, you know, with their parents still, or in a foster home, or whatever setting they were in. So I started to think that somebody who had that lived experience, like Christopher talks about, would be really incredibly valuable for the parents to see, hey, there's somebody that has traveled this journey, and there's hope. You know, that's the thing. We're hope peddlers. That's what we are. We want to sell hope, because that's what families need. They don't need another bureaucrat coming into their home to tell them, you know, jump over here and then do this. They get enough of that. What they really need is some compassion and some kindness. And they need to see that people actually care. And they need to see that this can be done. And I'll tell you something else that's really important to me, and to my efforts, and to Christopher. I think I could speak about this for him as well, briefly. I wanted our case managers to see that too. I wanted our case managers to see somebody that could come in and was put together and had recovered, and was a power of example to my case managers, because they're all young, or most of them are. You know, they come out of school, and, you know, they're in the helping profession, and most of them do not have that lived experience, and they don't know what they're walking into. So I also wanted a peer recovery specialist, not only for the families we serve first and foremost, but also for our own staff, to see, hey, guess what, guys? It's possible. You can recover. You can have a very successful life. And so I think that was really important for my case managers and the whole system to see. And certainly peer recovery does, well, I call it chopping wood and carrying water. They do the heavy lift, as far as I'm concerned, because they bring that hope to the families.
It's interesting that
you sound like you got your bachelor's in social work and your master's in social work.
Yeah, I did. I'm a double eagle. I got them both from FGCU. Yes.
Woo-hoo!
Yeah, I know. Can you believe it?
I do a little wake
Yeah.
up.
No, that's really great too, that it's an interesting way to look at it when you bring not only that hope aspect to the families, but alongside to your staff. Because so often in behavioral health, our helpers and our social workers only see that beginning and the process. And it's a unique experience when you get to work alongside of someone that's the byproduct of what you do,
Right.
and Chris is somebody that and I think we're going to hear from you in a little bit here, a little bit more about your story, of how you found recovery, both in treatment, but also community-based recovery. So with that being said, Chris, so to my understanding, so there's a case manager assigned to each family as a part of the program. Is it the FIT program you had mentioned? What does that stand for?
FIT is family intervention. I'm sorry. Okay, FIT stands for Family Intervention Treatment Team. I get my acronyms, and there's so many of them, I even get confused. So the FIT team, just really quickly, that's different from what Christopher does, only in that there's a professional team that's wrapped around the family, and it involves somebody like a professional from Salus Care, a targeted case manager, a regular case manager, and a psychiatrist. It's a big, there's a huge team of people that wrap around the family. Christopher, his role, and certainly he's going to be the one to talk about that, but what I wanted to insert Chris in was the IFST teams, which is our intensive family services team. And that team is a case manager, and then Christopher, and basically a case manager supervisor. It's still the same team concept, but we keep families, it's a lot smaller. So families that are very fragile don't have all of that, coming at them at one time. They've got, the case manager and Christopher, and we also have somebody else who's an MCAP who works, master's addiction professional, who also works in the home too. He comes in and basically does the assessment, and then Christopher and the case manager take over. But Christopher, you tell them all about it.
Yeah, because you have a unique role, Christopher. I mean, working alongside of a case manager, obviously, explain your role to us, and not just your role professionally, but your role to the families that you work with.
Absolutely. So whereas with the case manager, they not so much they're a position of authority, but I strictly come as a peer. I'm qualified to do what I do because I have the lived life experience of drug addiction, alcoholism, and mental health concerns. So whereas their case manager will come in and assign them case plans and drug screen them, I have nothing to do with that. I'm strictly there as a sober support system because first and foremost, if you can't maintain sobriety during your case plan, you're going to have some issues later on. So I come in, I just, I'm the phone number that they can call if they're having any issues. I'm going to come to their house. We're going to build a relapse prevention plan together. We're going to identify some strengths and weaknesses in your life and build on those strengths, because peer recovery is very strengths oriented, and we want to identify those, capitalize on those, and really build upon what you're good at. And let's focus on that and use those to progress through your case and through life in general.
Wow. So do you mind kind of sharing with us a little bit of your story and how you kind of ended up where you are today?
All right. So do you have about 3 hours?
Yeah, we'll condense it a little bit.
Okay. So my issues, the first thing that kind of popped up in my life were the mental health issues. I remember being about 9 or 10 years old and having a conversation with my mother. And I told her at about 9 years old that I didn't want to be alive anymore. And, you know, that's some heavy stuff for a 9-year-old to say. So obviously there were some red flags that popped up, and it kind of progressed until about the age of 12. And when I was 12 years old, I made an attempt to take my life, and that was my first visit to a mental health institution. And it wasn't the most fun place in the world, and I think it kind of grew a resentment at people that had authority over me, which later translated to, you know, law enforcement and things like that. And then around the age of 17, 18 was when I discovered and first tried alcohol and other substances. And I really found the relief that I was looking for in life. I mean, the best way I can put it is I walked through life like I had every muscle in my body flexed at the same time, and it was exhausting. And I found alcohol, and it became the solution to life that I had been looking for. And I think that's a really common theme with people that have substance abuse issues, is we kind of feel like there is this guidebook to life that we weren't given. And for me, alcohol was the solution to everything. It made me smarter, it made me funnier, it made me taller, it made me stronger. And you know, I have the kind of personality where I find something that makes me feel good and I do more of it. I can do it with Oreos today. I can do it with anything that makes me feel better. So that's kind of how I transitioned from mental health to substances. And I mean, I have many Baker Acts, I have many hospitalizations, and a lot of experience in, you know, lockdown.
Well, and it sounds like you've become, those are the things that have made you uniquely useful in your role today. And I think having that mental health paired with this and being able to be open about those struggles that you face. Do you ever hear the question, well, how do you, now that you have your addiction under control and your mental health under control, like, how do you know it wasn't just a phase? And what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, were you just drinking to relieve your symptoms of depression, or, you know, now that you've sought help for that, you know, how do you deal with those questions?
Yeah, for me, the chicken was the egg, and they went side by side for me, because addiction and mental health both run in my family. So I'm not an expert. I don't know if it's passed down genetically, but I would say there's a common theme among my family tree. And for me, nothing came first. I mean, the only reason the mental health came first is because I wasn't drinking at 9. Otherwise, if I had discovered it at 9 years old, I probably would have been drinking at that point as well. So now that I kind of have the addiction under control, I don't think I can safely drink again. I've done enough experimentation for about 12 years there of trying to control it, where just because I'm on a good set of medications, I have a psychiatrist and a psychologist that I love, I don't think I need to do any more experimentation. I've figured that out.
And with that being said, I mean, it sounds like you tell us a little bit more about your experience with treatment and how you kind of continued and found community-based recovery, because I know that's something, you know, you do promote for your clients that you work with, are the multiple pathways of recovery. And it sounds like you have experience with those pathways. And how do you feel like treatment and community-based recovery went hand in hand for you?
Well, I mean, I was introduced to community-based treatment when I was I attended Salis Care at about the age of 26. And I mean, I was all in. I was 100% ready to get and stay sober. and I never plugged myself into the community-based aspect of recovery. I kept all of my old friends. I attended the same places I'd been before. The only thing that changed was 28 days in an inpatient facility. And I got out of that inpatient facility and I did not stay sober. So I stayed out for about another year and a half doing more experimentation and trying to control it in many ways. And at 28 years old, I was in a pretty serious car accident where I'm pretty sure the only reason I'm still sitting here today is because I had a seatbelt on. I had decided, you know, they say jails, institutions, and death are the three byproducts of drug addiction and alcoholism. And I had been in the institutions, I've been to jail, and I wasn't ready to die. So I reached out to actually Park Royal and checked myself into a 28-day outpatient program there for dual diagnosed patients. And I tackled this thing and I took every suggestion. I got my meds figured out. I got a therapist that I love. And I think the most important part is I changed absolutely everything about my life. I found a 12-step fellowship that I felt like I belonged in, and I changed all of my friends. I really made my entire foundation of life was recovery based. And all my friends are sober. I'm involved in a lot of extracurricular sober activities. I'm involved in the Florida Conference for Young People in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a service board that serves our community and brings meetings into detoxes and rehabs. And I think it's so important that I changed my environments completely and really surrounded myself with sobriety, because I refused to put myself in the situation of being offered a drink or a drug in early sobriety, because I just find it so vital for me to have that 12-step fellowship, but for anybody to have some sort of sobriety network, whether it's Smart Recovery, whether it's secular organizations for sobriety, AA, NA, CA. There are a million fellowships out there, some spiritual, some not spiritual, some with steps, some without steps. And I just find it so important to identify a group of people that you can relate to, that have gone through some of the things that you've gone through, and really find a niche in this crazy world where people have gone through some of the same life experiences as you, and you can connect with them.
Well, and that's great. I mean, just the aspect of one person relating to another person is the principle of so many recovery programs. And I'm just interested to know from you, Ray, too, is, you know, obviously you identified this barrier with the families, and when did the peer recovery role come in, and what kind of prompted you to add that into, like, what did that look like, adding that and creating that as a position in the Children's Network?
And also, if I can tag onto that, Ray, what does it look like in real life in terms of how does Chris get referred particular clients? I know you have tons and tons of clients, but how does Chris get involved?
Well, we have several points of access, obviously, but generally we have an intake, triage, and referral process where the cases come over from DCF officially to the Children's Network. So there's one touch point where our ITR specialist could identify, hey, this family has some substance misuse issues. It would be great to put, you know, our peer recovery specialist and our MCAP. You know, again, we have that master's level addiction professional who goes out and does the assessments as well and treats the family. So there's a couple of touch points, but mainly he's going to get most of his referrals from our case managers. Okay. And of course, we have to do a lot of work in terms of making sure that Chris is known to our case managers, right?
Right.
So that's a big deal when you have a system as large as we do. And currently, right now, we serve 2,260 children as of today. So that's a fluid number, but it hovers right around. We're actually at an all-time high right now with kids in care. So yeah, the role, I had always envisioned kind of a substance abuse SWAT team. Like they dropped down from the ceiling like ninjas, and just wrapped themselves around the family and did whatever they needed to be able to, to get the family through. Because when I talk to our case manager, I talk to other people about our system of care, what the first thing I sort of say is, hey, at any time in your life, have you ever needed some help? Like when I talk to our pre-service class, our brand new case managers coming out of pre-service class, that's the first thing I ask them. Have you guys ever needed any help yourselves? Because most people, don't get to where they are in life, wherever that is, alone, right? Everybody needs help. So it was always an idea for me, because substance misuse is so prevalent. Why couldn't we insert somebody there that the families could relate to, that's not there telling them what to do? It's basically sharing with them what they did. How did you turn your life around, Chris? Well, he told you a small snippet of that, right? So the idea has sort of always been in the back of my mind, because if substance misuse is the main driver of your system, then you better be paying attention to all the tools that you could possibly have to change that. Because if I'm not doing that, I'm not a very good administrator.
Have you thought about, by the sounds of it, it sounds like Chris is your only peer specialist. Are you thinking about adding more? What does it mean for you, and from a business perspective, to add more peer specialists? Because CMS in about 2006 actually started reimbursing for peer specialists. Is that one of those things that you have to strategize for from a business perspective in terms of adding more?
Right. And child welfare and social work is like any other business. It is a business, right?
Right.
And Nicole and Megan and Christopher, you all know that. And the audience out there listening to this hopefully understands that this is a business like many other businesses. It has to be taken into consideration, the dollars and cents, or we won't get to help anyone.
Right.
So, but my dream, and it has to start out with some sort of dream, right? It has to start out, that idea has to be born from somewhere. So my dream is to have a whole unit of peer recovery specialists and work on a Medicaid number, which we already have. So we have to work on a substance abuse license to be able to start to bill Christopher services.
Got it.
But I want to branch out and turn this into something a lot bigger than it is now, because I think we're just starting to scratch the surface. And child welfare is we have to have a sense of urgency. I couldn't wait for, nothing against any of our partners out there at all. They do a great job. They work hard in our community. David Lawrence Center, Salus Care, Charlotte Behavioral Health Charlotte Behavioral is one of our partners that we do the FIT program with, not the IFST that Chris is involved in, but the FIT program that I told you about. That's a bigger team concept. Yeah, our partners do a great job, but I could not wait for them. I have to be able to respond very quickly and very urgently to my clients and my family's needs.
That's
Yeah,
great.
and
And
if I could just jump in here, what we're doing right now is so ground floor that when I came in, we didn't know how many peers I would be working with, but the referrals just started absolutely pouring in. I'm currently actively working with about 30 clients at the moment, and there's going to be a time where there's going to need to be 2 of me, and then there's going to need to be 4 of me. I just see this is such an instrumental part of the child welfare system that it's only going to grow from here.
You guys have any idea how much I love that? I love that. I do. It just takes me to a place. I mean, I love it because I think that's been one of the missing ingredients. I think that before you know it, that will be replicated across the state, you know, and I don't care who gets the credit for it. I only want the results. You know, I just want our families to be taken care of.
That's right.
I think we might need to come up with a new acronym, Ray.
Well, you guys, we'll all work on that one together. Okay?
Well, it's really, it's incredible to see the application, how you really, your vision for how to utilize this role in your system of care. You know, there are peer recovery support specialists out there, and really how that role was birthed. If we look at states like Nicole's home state, Rhode Island, they have it, it's called the Anchor Ed program there. And what they did was they took people from that are in recovery from the community, and anytime they had an overdose in their hospital system, that person would actually wake up to a peer specialist in their room saying, I've been where you're at, I know how you're feeling, and you don't have to live this way. There are multiple pathways of recovery for you out there, and I'm here to help you find that for you, whatever that may look like for you. And it made an incredible impact, but really just scratched the surface of an overdose epidemic. And a lot of states took to this idea, and it's something different across the country. And here in Southwest Florida, you know, I think we're just starting again to pick these up and put them in our community and different organizations. And it's just so cool to see what we've translated that role into, because it does. Addiction has now impacted families in every system of care. I mean, there really is no discrimination. So thank you, Chris, for sharing your story with us. And it's been really great getting to hear from you, Ray, too, and the change that you've created for the Children's Network, and the amount of families and children that you guys are helping together and as an organization. Did you have any questions, Nicole?
I was actually thinking for both of you, just because I feel like we can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is that we're in the midst of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I know
which one?
The coronavirus pandemic.
Oh, okay. I was thinking something else.
Oh.
Right, Chris?
And so you know, Ray, we've talked a little bit about, you know, how that's impacting all of the work that everybody at Children's Network is doing, because we have to implement social distancing, and, you know, I don't know what the percentages of your workforce that started to work from home, but it really impacts the way that you do business. And I wondered if you could talk, both of you could talk a little bit about, you know, what does that look like right now? And then Ray, particularly, what are you guys thinking about from this perspective of, you know, what happens if we can't, you know, get back to normal in the next couple of months, or, you know, in the fall, or we have second waves, or, you know, when you listen to the health experts, it sounds like, you know, realistically, this isn't going away. We need a vaccine, we need treatment before we do any of that stuff. So are you guys thinking differently about how to deliver services if we are in this for an extended period of time?
So there's a lot of opportunity here. That's the way I'm looking at this. There is a ton of opportunity. There is a lot of efficiencies built in with what we're doing right now, you know, together, us. Yep. So we've been doing a lot of that sort of thing. It's funny because Christopher called me the other day and asked me about a particular client, and whether or not he should see this person because they were technologically challenged a bit and were afraid they weren't going to be able to do what they needed to do with the virtual platform. And normally I would have said, well, of course, you know, go over there, do whatever, but I have to think of that person, and obviously I have to think about Christopher. So what I told him was, no, I'd rather you not do that. I'd rather you figure it out. And of course, him being the bright guy that he is, was able to figure out how to deliver the service by, you know, taking her step by step through how to attain that virtual platform. But I think for us geographically, and because we do serve, and as a matter of fact, We serve a geographical area just shy of the size of the state of Rhode Island. It's a huge geographical area that we serve. So we're going to have an opportunity coming up here, I think, to serve our families maybe a little differently. But with IFST, obviously the first letter in that is I, which stands for intensive. What that means is when we leave, this is a program specifically meant for kids staying in their home with their families. Well, in child welfare, your risk goes up exponentially when you leave kids in the home, right? When they're determined that there's a safety factor here, but yet you're choosing to leave the kids in the home with the parents. So the intensive part of that is you're in that family's home minimum twice a week, more than that. Well, this virtual platform will give us the opportunity to serve those families. Maybe we go out and see them twice a week, and then we have a virtual meeting with them, 2 additional times a week or whatever. So, from an efficiency standpoint, I'm looking at this as this is going to be filled with opportunities for us.
Yeah, I think so too. Are you noticing anything other than what Ray is talking about, Chris?
Well, for my position, I'm always a phone call away.
Right.
I would love to think that my presence is so comforting that they need me by their side. But just being able to talk through the emotions that come with addiction is such a huge factor to overcoming barriers in life. I just got off the phone with a peer today who said her biggest trigger is stress. And I mean, I can identify with that. I know a lot of people who aren't drug addicts and alcoholics will drink because they're stressed. Well, how do we talk through those emotions? And I think the biggest thing is having someone who's come out on the other side of addiction talk about how they deal with stress today. And you can do any of that over the phone. I've Skyped, I've FaceTimed with a number of my clients since this has started. And we've overcome a lot of barriers because this is scary. It's a scary situation that we're in. Thinking that you can catch a virus just by leaving your house, that's stressful.
Yeah. And
so
Ray,
we don't have to necessarily be in person to do that. So
yeah. Ray, are you at all seeing any change in your census at all? I know you talked about the amount of people you're serving, but are you seeing an uptick based on this or not?
Absolutely. There's definitely been a lot more kids coming through, and my fear, quite frankly, that keeps me up at night is the fact that when this pandemic is over and we don't have to, we can go out and see clients in person, what's going to happen to the census then? Because I think that when the kids aren't in school and there's not a lot of eyes in the community that's on the children, generally speaking, the call to the abuse hotline goes down.
Right.
So I'm still seeing an uptick in the census because people are under stress. They can't pay their bills. They're home more than they normally would be together. And there's obvious opportunities for families to get closer, or there's opportunities for families to do different things, especially when there's substance abuse in the home. Right. So that unfortunately is fraught with several different opportunities. Some of them aren't good. So when we get done with this pandemic, my fear is that our census is going to explode.
Right. Yeah, I worry about that too. You keep reading about all of the domestic violence and interpersonal violence that's likely happening while people are basically trapped at home. So I worry about that too. I was curious if it went down. There's a part of me that wondered if it went down, but the fact that it's continuing to go up it's concerning.
Yeah, it is concerning.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think you're going to have an explosion. So I'm noticing the time, Megan. We're almost out of time. So Last time I described this question, the final question to you guys, I messed it all up. So I have to take responsibility for messing up the storyline of it.
I have one more question, Nicole,
you do?
before
Go.
we get to that.
Oh, go.
One more question for each of you, actually. Ray, I want to know, I mean, you've clearly worked your way up
Look at
to
Ray.
COO of the Children's Network of Southwest Florida, serving this 5-county area, and you're making incredible changes and impacts in the system. What advice would you give to someone aspiring to work in a leadership role in the field of social work? But more so, what unique qualities of being a social worker have you found most useful in your role as a leader?
Thank you for that.
That's an excellent question, first of all. So I think the things that work for me wouldn't necessarily work for everyone, but I also think there's some commonalities here, and I'll be quick about it. I know we're running out of time, so because I could talk about this issue for a lot longer than we have, but
well, we'll have you back. We're going to have you
first and foremost, you have to have a sense of humor. You really do. You have to be able to laugh at yourself in this business. Yeah. Secondly, I think you have to have compassion. That's the number one ingredient. You have to have an open heart, and be able to recognize that others, need us as helpers. I really think that's an important ingredient. And you have to be willing to work really, really hard to get where you want to go. So, I know those are kind of basic tenets, but they've served me well. And I also think that you have to be smart enough to have good, or at least adequate, self-care practices. You have to be able to take care of yourself, or you can't take care of anybody else. And you have to have some boundaries. So, those are some of the things that have helped me reach my goals in my professional life, in a nutshell.
Perfect. Well, and thank you so much for sharing that. It was a perfect segue too into my question for Christopher. I know Christopher, I know him personally. He's a good friend of mine. And I know him to be one of the most hilarious people that I've ever met. And I know that while we're talking about something, so serious today, I want to know from you, Christopher, how I just read this article about this comedian that turned substance abuse counselor. And I want to know how you use humor in a role that has such a deadly earnestness about it.
Absolutely. Listen, I drank and I drugged for a long time because I was having fun for a while, and because there was a lot of funny things that happened along the way. And I think that is one of the ways that I can bond with clients who have gone through some of the same things that I have, is to identify where our stories are similar. And some of those are really funny stories. And what I've noticed, there's like a theme of dark humor that comes with addiction. And a lot of my friends that are sober have this dark sense of humor, because we have to be able to laugh at ourselves in life in general. And especially when you've gone through some of the things that we've gone through, you have to use humor to get by. And so I use it to bond with clients. I use it in my general life because life's funny, so let's look at the funny parts and not dwell on the negatives, or we'll never recover.
I thought where you were going with that, Megan, was that you read the article that it was social worker comedian turned substance use counselor. I thought where you were going was, how do you go from peer recovery specialist to comedian? And are you
it's gonna happen.
Are you going that route?
Yeah. Well, it's only a matter of time before we see Christopher stand up.
We'll have to have the conversation when Ray's not here, so he doesn't think you're leaving him, but perhaps that's what's happening.
It wouldn't be the first time, nor the last.
All right.
All right, I'll pass it back over to you, Nicole. Thank you so much, guys. Those are great answers. Wow.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. And thank you for that last question about social work. That was supposed to be my question. I forgot it. So, okay. So our final question is back to kind of a little bit of, easing it up again. So one of the ideas that I had was that I used to watch this show called Desus and Mero, and it's now on Showtime. Chris,
Yeah, I'm familiar with
all
it.
right. So they were formerly known as the Bodega Boys, still known as the Bodega Boys, but they just have a different title of a show. They're on Showtime. They used to be on Vice or Viceland. I never know which one. That's the part I mess up. And they had this thing where they would basically say, every bodega has some kind of neon sign outside. And their question would always be, what would your bodega sign say? What would your neon sign say? I got to go back and look at their full story about this because I'm sure I'm messing it up again. But on their show, they'll have like a rainbow that appears above your head. So we'll have to edit something funky in for you guys eventually. But the question for us is Megan came up with the idea because you want to tell how you came to the conclusion of this
really quick. I mean, it was me just taking my trash out one day and somebody pulled up to the dumpster and her car was the back of her car was covered in bumper stickers. And I just took the time to acknowledge some of them. And I felt like I knew her as a person already and actually prompted me to engage with her in conversation. And, my question would be, maybe you already have bumper stickers, I don't know, but, what would your bumper stickers be? What do you want the world to know about you, even if you don't come in contact with them? Or what do you want to leave people wondering about you that symbolizes something that's important to you? Or maybe just a phrase that you use often. What would your bumper sticker be?
You want a serious one?
No, it doesn't have to be.
You could have multiple. I mean, this lady had when I tell you 7 bumper stickers. She couldn't see out her back window. I don't know how it worked. But.
I think the biggest thing that I would want people to know about me, the message that I would pass along is that we do recover. It doesn't matter if it's from mental health or substance abuse or just life in general, we do recover. So I think that would be a good one for me.
I love that.
Ray?
Love that.
Well, so if we're going all gushy, mine would have to be compassion's not just a word, it's an action. Because I do believe it's an action. It's us helping each other. That's what it's about. But if I had a funny one, it would be don't start nothing, there won't be nothing.
That's a good one. I like both of those.
Right. It's a hat tip for my boys at Suncoast.
That's okay. All right. Well, that's
that
definitely. We'll have to get some stickers made up for you guys. Those sound pretty good.
Right. Okay.
Thank you so much. It was amazing. I want to bring you guys back again to talk about all sorts of other stuff, but Chris, particularly, I'm really interested in this. I'm interested in the idea of post-traumatic growth. And you were talking around it a lot today. And I love this idea of, going through the trauma and then coming out on the other side of it and knowing that, and particularly around the peer support stuff is that actually contributing and giving back to people is the one thing that gives people a sense of purpose. And I just love that concept because it goes to your bumper sticker too, right? We can recover.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I spent so much time just taking from the world that I got sober and I realized it really was time to give back. And as far as traumatic growth, struggle breeds growth, in my opinion, and the struggle of an alcoholic or a drug addict is deadly earnest, like we were saying. And so when you come out of the other side of that, you have no choice but to grow from it.
That's right.
Yeah, have us back. I want to talk more.
Yeah, definitely. We will.
We definitely will.
Thank you guys
so much for the work that you guys are doing.
Yes,
thank you
for everything. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.